So this is game 2 of round 4 against Turboland, down a game. I boarded in 2 Deprive, 2 Negate. I took out the War Monks, because they just get blocked on the ground. Chumped by plant tokens and whatnot, and the counter's really important. If I could do it again, I would board out the Gideon and possibly something else for a Path to Exile or two, because it seems like the game states uh, that play out are better for Path than Gideon. Gideon's only really good in this like very specific game state where they have an Avenger and you have lethal on board, and you don't have an answer to the Avenger, and they don't have an answer to your lethal, and they don't have an answer to your Gideon, and then it's okay. Then it'll win the game. But other than that, it's like 5 mana, which, you have to tap out for, so you're not going to be able to hold counter mana up, and it's probably going to get countered anyway. It still dies to All Is Dust, and it gets chumped by the plant tokens, and the assassinate ability is never really going to be relevant. So I would have boarded that out for Path, because sometimes you can Path an Oracle, and it's beneficial. And also, the more realistic game states are where you like exchange resources for a while, and you kind of grind down to this point where the land players technically up cards, but they mostly just have like a bunch of lands in play, whereas the Mythic player may be behinding cards but actually has a board presence, and the land player can pull out of that with basically 2 cards, Avenger and All Is Dust. And if they have to go for the Desperation Avenger, then having paths, having access to Path to Exile is obviously beneficial. So that's what I would have done if I could redo it. But this is an obvious mulligan, and this hand, no green and not even double blue for Deprive, so that's obviously a ship. Thankfully he goes to 5 as well, so it's not going to be completely one-sided. He has double Tectonic Edge, which means, he's got a weird, like he obviously drew that. He, when he played the Misty Rainforest, he thought for a long time, like a good 40 seconds, and sometimes you can go off of those timing tells and figure out what they have, or what they could have. In this situation, it's not really applicable, because, he mulled to 5, and like there's so many options where he could have like Explore, but he wants to see if he draws a forest so he can fetch him islands, or or Ponder, or he has a counter that he's trying to hold up, or blah blah blah. So, but in general, like if this was a more normal game, when somebody like plays a fetch land and just tanks, you have to think about what they could be thinking about, and kind of file that knowledge away, and then as you accumulate more information, you can slowly like piece together and decipher what their hand is and play accordingly. And that's a level of thinking that a lot of players don't think to reach, because it's so outside of Magic, and it's a tool that's pretty useful when you get to a certain point, but obviously it's no replacement for strong technical play. So it turns out it was Ponder. In real life, people give out way more information with like their hands and their eyes, how they tap their mana, and how long they think, and all of that. And if you ever want to practice sort of reading people, a good way to do that is we actually did this in Atlanta, because some guys saw me call out my opponent's hand because he was taking too long, and they thought it was the funniest thing. So then for the rest of the day, we just went around and like stood behind people and watched the first 5 turns of the game, and then tried to figure out what his opponent had in his hand, and then we'd go and check. And so you can do that at the next time you're at a PTQ, at the top tables, find somebody playing a deck that you know how to play, and sit behind him, try and figure out what his opponent has, and then check it out. Just make sure that you don't mess up their game by giving away information or disrupting them or whatever, because like their sanctioned match of Magic the Gathering is more important than your little treasure hunt for entertainment. But anyway, so he ponders the turn later, which was the correct thing, and he hit his Misty Rainforest. Here he has 5 lands, so he can't all his dust, so I'm fine just running all my guys out there. Here, normally when they have a Tectonic Edge up, you want to activate your lesser powerful manland, but there are a couple reasons I went for Colonnade here. First of all, it forces him to edge it. There are some weird combinations of cards where, like, if I attack with a Wildwood, he could just chump one of the ground guys with his plant, go to 2, and then, like, using that extra mana, there are a couple series of cards that he can do to pull out of it. But if I attack with the Colonnade, then he absolutely has to edge it, because he can't risk going to 1. Because if he goes to 1, then his fetch lands all turn off, which means, his Jaces are worse, his Oracles are worse, his Cobras are worse, and he has the dead lands. So I'm really forcing him to do this. Also, because it maximizes my mana for this turn, which is kind of incidental since I'm not doing anything anyway. But more importantly, it potentially maximizes my mana on a future turn, because this costs less to activate. So I can activate Wildwood and cast something, for example. So that's another reason. And the last reason is because he has 2 edges up anyway, so he's gonna blow up both my things. So I might as well, go for the gusto, and sure enough, he does blow it up. So here he plays Jason, bounces Baneslayer, and kills my Stirring Wildwood. I don't have double white anymore, so I can't replay Baneslayer, but I draw Birds of Paradise, and this might be a mistake. It's pretty close. Like, I put him in a bad spot either way, but I'll walk you through my thought process. I attacked him instead of Jace, because with Exalted, it dropped into 1, which turns off his fetch land, which makes his Jace worse, his Oracles worse. It makes it harder for him to get to all his dust or Avenger mana. And by attacking him, I'm also making it so that my Hierarch is potentially lethal and my bird is a flying lethal creature. So he has to get a blocker down and his Jace. It's not like if I don't kill his Jace, he gets max value out of it, because no matter what, the Jace is kind of locked out, because either I kill it or I attack him to 1 and the Birds of Paradise is lethal, so he has to keep bouncing the bird with his Jace. So I choose to do that. I think it gives him less options, but I'm not positive. He plays Oracle and he hits a Colony Garden off of it, which is nice. Now he bounces the bird, and he would have, 2 chump blockers here, and he might actually be able to kind of pull himself back into this. But, I mean, I still have him in a really bad spot, and then I draw Sacher Step and kill him. So let's go to the next game.